All right. Again, hello everyone to today's webinar. I am Mauricio. I'm the CEO and founder of cloudwoods.net, and today this webinar is co-hosted by CloudBerry Lab, a cross-platform cloud backup software. And in this webinar, we are going to tackle a topic that's been pretty much on the news in the last couple of weeks a lot, and that is ransomware. We are going to talk about what ransomware is, in case you don't know what it is, and how it's actually endangering a lot of business owners, but also obviously personal files of a lot of people who are surfing the internet, downloading email attachments, and there a lot of dangers with ransomware because, as the name of the malware ransomware suggests, essentially you're held hostage, or your files are held hostage by those attackers, and you are required to pay ransom for to get your files back, if you get your files back. But I don't want to advance the presentation too much, because we're going to dive obviously into the details, what ransomware is, how it came to be, a couple of facts and numbers, so that you are aware of what you can expect. And then also why we're here is we want to discuss a couple of the solutions, or how you can essentially avoid being a victim of ransomware, and if you are, or if your organization is, how you can mitigate the risks and actually get your files back safely. And for that reason, I'm very happy to welcome Eugene Rudinsky here to this webinar. He is the solutions architect of CloudBerry Lab, and he knows essentially quite a lot about ransomware because they have a lot of companies who have been affected by it, and obviously they have a solution to, as I said before, to mitigate the risks of ransomware, and he's going to show us a little bit how it works and how you guys can protect yourself from it. So without further ado, Eugene Rudinsky, welcome to the webinar.
Excellent. So thank you very much, Mauricio, for that very nice introduction. Indeed, we've been contacted by many customers and prospects with regards to ransomware, and what kind of solutions we can offer today, specifically and effectively designed for that kind of thing. And so today the webinar, the goal for the webinar and the goal for this talk is going to be about different options and different, let's call it, different recommendations that we can give to our customers and prospects based on experience that we have received so far. So before we get into ransomware details, just want to highlight a couple of things here. So first of all, as Mauricio mentioned, we're gonna run a few polls just to get better understanding what kind of experience you have, and if you have ever seen ransomware, that's great. If not, so this webinar is gonna show you what exactly ransomware can make with your computer and with your files. So this webinar is being recorded. So we're gonna upload it to the resource for the review. So search for the follow-up email with for the details. And finally, there is Q&A box. So feel free to use that Q&A box to leave your comments or ask your questions, your feedback. It's just something that we really want to see from your side. So with that, I think we're ready for the first poll, so let's just quickly run it. So by the way, I'm going to launch the poll. So you should see the poll itself on your screen. So if you can reply using the tool from GoToWebinar, that would be great. Okay, almost 50% of audience so far. 75. Another few seconds.
Apparently, we even have a couple of ransomware victims among the audience, which is also quite interesting. So yes, it is apparently a problem.
Yeah, that's great. So I'm going to close the poll and show results so everybody can see that. Yeah, so I'm a ransomware victim. So hopefully you'll get some useful tips out of that webinar, and next time it's not going to be the case. So let's just quickly run into the poll. So that's going to be simpler. What files do you want to protect? So personal files or computer files and business files and servers. Okay, 50-50, interesting. Okay, 79, another few seconds. All right, so I think we're ready to close the poll and show results. Mauricio, what do you think?
Yeah, it looks interesting. Actually, the last polls we run, we had more, I think, personal users on the webinar, and now it seems slightly tilted towards business files and servers, which is obviously interesting. But then again, ransomware is particularly dangerous to businesses because ransomware can essentially halt businesses' operations. So that's why I think the results reflect that this poll.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, totally agree with you. And with that, I think we're ready to go through some of the key things around ransomware, and then, as I promised, we're gonna go into some key tips that you can use for your personal or business protection. So there is interesting fact. I found some I did some actually research and found some interesting facts. So they're actually available in the internet, and so ransomware is now a multi-billion-dollar business, really, because the amount of ransom that you pay usually is, I mean, the average amount of ransom that you pay when you become a victim of the ransomware attack is roughly between 300 up to 600. You usually pay in bitcoins, and so that's the average check. And if take this number in mind and then multiply that by number of computers affected by ransomware, so that's going to be a big number, which makes actually ransomware a multi-billion-dollar business. Another thing is that in some requests, so the ransom were around $1 million, which is I think all about enterprise and about the computers with amount of data that is very important for the company. And the ransom is calculated based on some internal things. Ransomware is multi-billion-dollar business, right? So this some of the ransom requests has exceeded $1 million, and then 12%, 12 month, in the last 12 months, is nearly half of all U.S. business have been affected by ransomware. So interesting survey, right? So back to that slide. So 46% had some form of ransomware in the past. 91% of incidents with encrypted data, because we may have different apart the encryption behavior, we may get the malware with some other things like the changing the structure of the file, deleting of the file, the different other malware attacks. But 91% were having incidents with encrypted data, which is actually ransomware. So 2% admitted to pay ransom, which is not that big number, but still, those people were trying to recover their data using the standard approach, which is recommended by attackers. It's just a straightforward payment to get their data back. So and the 1K dollar was the average payment, which is I believe again from that 2% of responders, which I believe was around 20 if we talk about 1,000 customers. So they were trying to get their data back.
Yeah, and that is actually pretty significant, because this means that, I mean, for the people that produce that kind of malware, it is apparently working, because people are paying the ransom because they just cannot access their files anymore, and they're essentially willing to pay an average payment of $1,000 without the security that they're going to get their files back, because obviously they see something like, hey, pay this amount to this Bitcoin address, but they can never be sure that they actually get their files back. So they're paying essentially in a black box, and apparently it's working for those malware producers quite well, even if it's only 2% that admitted to pay ransom. And I assume that the black number is quite higher, because people don't like to admit that they've fallen victim to ransomware and that they even paid something in exchange.
Yeah, absolutely agree. So thanks for the comments. And this is quite a big number, as you mentioned. And the other thing is, I mean, is pretty good news that 80% of responders were able to recover their data, their lost data, their encrypted data without any payments at all. I think it's just because they followed the recommendation that we're going to discuss in a few seconds. So with that, I'm gonna do something really dangerous. So please do not really repeat that in your with your computer. I'm gonna show you quickly what exactly ransom can do for you and with your file. So for that, Mauricio, can you confirm that you can see my Windows 2012 R2 with something on the dashboard? On the dashboard.
Yes, I can see it right now.
Okay, perfect. So that's just a server a server computer, but the things that might happen to your regular computer are pretty similar. I mean, to your desktop computers that you use usually at home or at your at your desk at your work. So they're pretty similar. And so let's take a look at the file, for example. So that's just documents, few pictures on my desktop. And if I open up them, so we can simply review the content. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to run the WannaCry, which is pretty famous and quite popular ransomware that we've seen for the last 12 or so months. And so let's do that quickly. Again, so do not try to repeat that unless you understand the specific and you secure completely, and you can make some some points for the restart. Please do not do that. So essentially, what we've done, we executed the ransomware, which is WannaCry. We're going to be discussing in a few seconds how that can be done. So one of the famous way is just receiving attachments over email and then executing the attachment as, for example, PDF or JPEG file with some sort of pictures received from some of our relatives or some friends, and we're really interested to see the content, but that's in fact ransomware. So that's it really. So ransomware took about a few seconds to infect everything around, and so now it's not possible to work with any files because they encrypted, and so there you go. So you get the warning message that oops, your important files are encrypted, and the only way you can do right now is either get that unique code and then start to pay, or you can just delete your data because they're useless at all.
So does it always happen instantly? So whenever you execute the attachment, does it encrypt the files instantly, or is it like a time bomb that can happen like in 2 weeks time after opening the attachment, or how does it work in general?
Well, actually, it depends on the form and the name of the ransomware or the malware at all. I have actually some samples and examples and some forms of malware in one of my next slides. But that particular encrypts the files immediately once you execute that again as attachment, for example, or as something else like as the browser plugin and etc. There are some other forms of malware that may sit in your network for, silently without any infections. And like a time bomb, like you mentioned, might start to affect other files, and you actually slowly understand that, okay, so there is some form of malware, and I need to fight against that thing. Another bad thing about that is that this bad guy actually infects also all the network shares that we may have attached to the computer. So that's why we see that significant, like a snowball growth of the ransomware attacks in the corporate segment, especially in the companies that are running under domain policies, and they have constant access to some sort of network shares. For some sort of network shares that they can, they can have full access just because it's, internal files exchange, etc. And this actually makes this ransomware, malware software distributed even, insanely. So it can start to affect other computers over network shares, for example. So that's a sample of WannaCry, which is one of the famous malware, one of the famous ransomware that we've seen.
Yeah, there's a question by Kent, and he's asking if when the network share is affected, or the folders, if the WannaCry virus can also infect other computers on the network accessing the same share.
Yeah, I think I mentioned that, and I gave example of why corporate segment is so interesting target for all this kind of malware, because they usually get all the computers attached to some sort of SMB, UNC, some sort of shares, and since WannaCry can affect can in fact network share files. So that's going to be a big issue for other computers, because it's going to be a chain. So the first computer infects the network share, and then this network share infects other users across the corporate network. So that's the big problem. Okay, so another thing is the why that's quite interesting. About months ago, it's been kind of a spike in the newspapers, and so all newspapers were talking about, either WannaCry, Petya, Locker, and some other sort of ransomware and malware, and I just want to highlight some of the famous forms and titles, as I said earlier. WannaCry, you've seen just a few seconds ago. I mean, that actually depends on the region and the continent that where you based in. But I'm based in Europe, and we see quite oftenly WannaCry, WannaDecryptor, also kind of similar family, CryptoLocker. So now the Petya, which is another form of ransomware, which essentially infects the entire system. And the way it works is, completely different to WannaCry. I mean, it actually encrypts the entire overall content, but it works on the more low level layer. So essentially, it encrypts the volumes that you have under your system, and you can't really boot your system. I mean, you can boot your system, but it tells you straight away that your system is actually encrypted, and in order to get your data back, you need to pay ransom. So all these forms and titles encrypt users' data and ask for ransom, as I said earlier. I mean, it's quite a popular form because your data might be very important, and you may want to pay for that data. All right. So what exactly we can do in order to avoid that? So how exactly what are the options available for us? Essentially, so when you get your files encrypted by some sort of malware, so there are only two options for you: is either pay the ransom or lose the data. And unfortunately, both are incredibly unfortunate outcomes because you on the left hand, if you pay the ransom, there is no guarantee that you can get your data back because you paid to somewhere. You actually pay over bitcoins, and um, they are completely unknown. So you don't really know whom you pay. There is no guarantee that you receive correct encryption key that will help you to encrypt your data. And on the other hand, is that if you don't really pay, but you become the victim, you can't really recover your data. You just simply lose the data. However, there are some recommendations that we want to go through today. So, first of all, protection. It's all about patching, updating your system. So first of all, ensure that your systems are up to date. You have solid upgrade plan, and ensure that upgrades and patches aren't going to cause any problems similar or even higher than the ransomware. Because if the patch or hotfix of the system is pretty new, so that might be a problem because it might be not really tested enough, not really mature enough, not really robust. And when you get that thing updated, so you can't really guarantee anything. So just make sure that all the updates and patches are tested, maybe sandbox or some kind of testing environment where you can try your tests and hotfixes first. And when you get 100% guarantee for the data, so just go ahead and update your systems. So, and essentially have solid upgrade plan. That's going to help you much. So when we talk about the backups, make sure that you protect your backups, because I mean, you have your original data, you have your files, your photo, your video files, your documents, etc. I believe that either corporate segment and admins that are looking after the IT environment in the corporate, or if that's personal data, you might be aware that there is very important to have backup of your data. And there are a few recommendations for your backups and for the backups protection. So first of all, never use the admin account for user account for all admin tasks. So for example, if you need to get access to network share, it's much better if you follow the dedicated account for the backup services, and maybe another best practice is to have a separate account for storage access. So that's going to help you much. That's going to help you to restrict your access to those different points, and that's going to isolate your small moving parts. And restrict users effectively. So again, do not really give very much power to certain user if they don't really need that power. Just restrict users' permissions effectively and make sure that they get access to certain things they really need today. All right. Protection. Protection number 3. So what is important is actually education. And I think in order to prevent the malware distribution and malware appearing in your computer is first of all education. So if you work in IT department and you have a corporate a corporate segment which you're looking after, and so first of all, spend some time to educate those people. If you are looking at this webinar for personal usage, so educate yourself. So how exactly we can receive the ransomware or malware? So usually they're coming over email. So if you use things like Gmail or Hotmail or different other available publicly resources. So they usually come with certain spam filter and the antivirus protection, but it's not really enough because you may receive some sort of attachments over email, and those attachments are really the main source of ransomware and again different other malware. So you just execute them like I did a few minutes ago, and as you see, I got my computer fully encrypted by WannaCry ransomware, which asked me immediately for a payment. So email attachments is something that is quite popular for getting the entire system infected. Archives, browsers, extensions. We may see some. We may try to download them if we see that sort of plugin gives us some, great things, great capabilities for us. So it can start to infect our data, our computer effectively. Yeah. So once we talk about the some recommendations, there are some third-party tools that we can suggest here at CloudBerry. It's actually the third-party tools that are designed for detection of ransomware, and Hitmap Pro, Zimana, or Malwarebytes. So these are some of the examples that you may want to get in your computer installed, and they may help you to detect your malware, detect your ransomware appeared on the computer, and this can prevent the further distribution of malware on your computer. All right. So once we actually become victim, if we couldn't really prevent the ransomware and malware things infected our computer. So the recovery recommendations, or the recommendations that I want to follow just right now, can help you to at least isolate it and limit the part of the computers or part of data that are going to be infected by the malware. So first of all, don't panic. So if you see there is some suspicious behavior on your computer and you can't really open up your files, or you can't really get access to some sort of parts of your system. So first of all, don't panic. Make sure that try to figure out what is that exactly. Try to isolate the root, the cause, the root of the problem, and once isolated, once you detach that computer or part of the system from the overall corporate network, if we talk about the corporate segment, or if we detach that computer from the home office or the home, and we have a number of computers, just detach that system from your network, and figure out if there are anything might be infected in your network, like network shares. Again, if you WannaCry, and one of the bad things about WannaCry is that it infects immediately network shares as well, and that's going to become a great breach to other computer. So clean up the network, make sure that you don't have any other sources of that malware installed or deployed somewhere else. So that's going to help you to prevent the distribution of the malware. Another thing is that recovery. Again, it's all about recovery. It's all about the process when you can get your data back. Again, remember the two options that you get when you become victim. So you can either pay or you're gonna lose your data. The third option is essentially the recovery. So if you have your backup saved somewhere, so that's gonna help you very much. That's gonna get your data back, even if that's going to get your data back since you put them somewhere. And from the CloudBerry perspective, we have some very good recommendations for that, and very good features right on board. So first of all, please follow 3-to-1 rule. So this rule will guarantee, I believe, your data recoverability, even if you have your, let's say, on-site segment infected by ransomware or something else, or like malware software. So the 3-to-1 rule will help you to recover your data, since you have two different locations, and the with one off-site, which might be, for example, cloud. Like we can help you to achieve with cloud backup, the CloudBerry backup for cloud storages like Amazon S3, like Microsoft Azure, and some other form of some other providers. So this actually, the product can help you to mitigate risk and to keep your data in two different locations. With 5.6 version of the product, we introduced the hybrid backup feature that actually can do the backup at the same time to different locations, where the first location might be a local storage, something that we may keep on prime, like for example network attached storage, and the other one might be in the cloud, again can be S3 or something else, and at the same time that can go into different locations, and that's going to help us very much, because again, following 3-to-1 rule, we may be infected on prime, but at the same time we keep data somewhere else on offsite, and that can recover our system in case of complete failure. So remediation, that's quite important. When you face the problem, try to learn and try to make a lesson from that problem. So first of all, obviously, report to law enforcement, educate your users much more, try to figure out what was the gateway for that malware into your either corporate segment or into your home office or into your home computer. Try to fix the gap, apply new patches in your security, improve the recovery plans. If you don't really follow the 3-to-1 rule, I really suggest you to review your current protection things. Try to figure out if you're ever affected by that sort of malware, that sort of problem. So try to figure out what will happen to you if that data is very important. So maybe it's not really late to implement 3-to-1 rule. So with that, I'm actually done, and the only what I can suggest you is to try our backup solution, CloudBerry Backup, with ability to implement 3-to-1 rule, with the ability to implement the hybrid backup functionality, when we can keep data into different locations, and that can help us. The CloudBerry Backup can help us to do that even at the same time. There are million different other features that might be really helpful for you, not only for ransomware and for the malware protection, but also for other things. And there is actually a completely free version available on the CloudBerry Backup website with obviously some limitations. And as based on the polls, we see some of the users are here due to the personal usage. So our product might be helpful, even with the free version, might be helpful for personal data protection.
Yeah, thank you, Eugene. I mean, I think the facts that you shared with us, they were very revealing, and they definitely show that ransomware is a problem not only for business users, but also for personal users. But that businesses are like especially in danger because it can halt the operation, and it can actually move entire companies out of business if they cannot operate any longer. So that's also something that we at CloudWoods always advocate, is that please people get a backup, and ideally, as you mentioned, the 3-to-1, apply the 3-to-1 rule if you can. And I think CloudBerry is a great tool because it's fairly easy to use, and you can be platform agnostic, so you don't have to really decide for now which provider you go with. You can use the software and then see which platform, which cloud storage platform fits best to your needs and also budget. Now there is one more question by Daniel, and he's asking if the WannaCry or another ransomware can infect the remote PC if I'm connected via remote desktop and have my local PC infected. If there is any spread with remote connections.
So I think I've replied that to Daniel, but to let everybody know, as far as, well, at least for the WannaCry, I can confirm that the main direction it uses for infection other computers is actually corporate network or just network. So effectively over network shares, that's going to infect other files sitting on the other network shares over admin accounts that you may use for getting to network shares. That's going to be the main gateway for entering to the corporate network and for getting access to other computers. So I think, as far as I'm aware, there is not really possible to infect other computers over remote desktop. So maybe we can see that in future. Hopefully not, but at least for WannaCry
Hopefully not. Yeah.
and for other things that I mentioned in one of my slides, no, they don't do that over remote desktop. So you're safe to get access to your computer. But actually, if you get access over remote desktop to that computer, so that computer has network access. So make sure that you either isolate, maybe play with the firewall ports and different rules that you may apply to the firewall policy, and try to figure out if you can isolate that computers, completely, so it's not going to affect other computers.
All right. Thank you, Eugene. As I said before, it was very revealing. And yes, we are going to make a recording available that we're going to upload to CloudWood's YouTube channel as well. And also, we're going to send out a follow-up email after this webinar with the recording, so you can review all the information that we've covered in today's webinar. Okay, so thank you everyone for attending, and I hope to see you in our next webinar. And thank you again, Eugene, for this awesome presentation.
Thanks, Mauricio. Thanks everyone for joining us today, and have a great week.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.